Anand joins us now. Let's take a conversation forward with Safir. Safir, fantastic to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Safir,
you for having me.
It's a market which perhaps could be called as a dream market for investors, a dream market for traders, but a market which is only obliging if you believe that better days are coming. What do you make of the market right now? Are markets running ahead of themselves, or the party has just about started and we have a long way to go?
Well, I personally am a believer in the fact that a huge transition is in place. We are having what is called as a digital revolution. And I think one of the things that the government has clearly manifested is the move toward digital India. And all of a sudden, I see 130 crore Indians are on the same platform of digital as they were not a few years back. So according to me, this is a huge catalyst for the complete paradigm change of what lies ahead for India. In fact, it is probably the number one catalyst to transform India to the highest growth rate that it ever saw.
Safir, when you say that we are on the shift, on a verge of a new paradigm shift, and technology is going to be the enabling factor for it, how does one really translate that into an investment opportunity? Should one stick with IT services? Should one invest in internet companies? Should one, buy into companies like Asian Paints and Pidilite, which are early enablers of technology? Because technology is connected with, there is technology in everything we do.
Yeah, so Nikunj, I have had the benefit of reading, and when you read certain things, you become far more disciplined in your thought process. So there are two books that I have been reading, and one of them I have read, and one of them I'm still in the midst of reading. And what is essentially these books are have sort of taught me is the fact that there is a huge change, a paradigm change in the way human beings are reacting. And in the first book, which has been written by an author called Vivek Wadhwa, who talks about incremental to exponential growth, he gives a very interesting example of how there are multiple factors collaborating in order to bring in change. For example, when you had Uber, it was not as if Uber was going to grow on its own, particularly when it did not own any cars. Uber's growth was centric around the growth of internet. The growth of internet was centric around the growth of phones. Now, neither the internet nor the phones were owned by Uber. But within all this, there was also a socio change. That is, human beings began to trust the fact that they could sit in a car with a stranger that they never knew. They could live in the home of somebody that they never knew because of Airbnb. And therefore, the entire paradigm of trust changed. Then came payment gateways. The fact that I could make a payment for the vehicle by just tapping, a certain charge on my phone, or it was already pre-charged, enabled me to do that ride in a very transparent way. And as a result of that, it was not just Uber that benefited, but it was a collaborative benefit that happened to many other, industries. Now, in another very fascinating book, which is The Future is Faster Than You Think, written by a gentleman called Diamandis and Stephen Kotler, they are saying that the computer, the Moore's law, which talks about how computer, powers will go up in every 18 months, they say that a computer will now be able to beat or match a human brain by as early as 2023. And in 25 years thereafter, the computers will actually exceed all of human beings put together in terms of brain power. So what is basically happening is that this massive growth that is happening on the computing side is going to cause many industries to do well. Now, of course, I can give you examples. Of the most obvious is the IT industry itself, and I don't necessarily mean only large IT. This will also be a massive game changer for many startups. It will be a massive game changer for many fintech providers. I'm sorry? It will be a massive game change for many startups. Can you hear me?
It's gone.
Yes, it will be a massive game change for healthcare. I mean, the way people's health will be monitored, and the last time I'd come on your show, I'd spoken about how health management services will become a big trigger. It will cause a lot of financial inclusion. I mean, look at this. Today, a Safir Anand sitting in Delhi who is not aware of a housewife sitting in, for example, Himachal, is able to buy her pickles and get a very good quality delivery because of the fact that there is exposure on social media or exposure on the net. There are very good packaging material available. There's very good logistic available. There's transparency available. And all of a sudden, the entire business paradigm changes. And this money that is coming into the ecosystem is business money. And this business money will then find capital, and capital will find the IPO, and IPO will find sort of a rating, which is what happened with brands like Dr. Bector's, Mrs. Bector's. So it's going to be a massive, massive inclusion of multiple sectors. And you have to see businesses that are not only doing things on their own, but are going to directly benefit from this huge explosion of digital.
Safir, it's a great point that the way we do business has changed, and that's how natural migration happens, and that's how society is involved. But if I frankly look at the ability of companies to adopt, and I'm using financial services as an example here, HDFC and Bajaj Finance, even though they are big in size and are perhaps the obvious names, have adopted to technology in a far more deeper manner and a collaborative manner than other banks have done. Similarly, if I look at the supply chain management, it's been done exceedingly well by a Nestle, a Pidilite and an Asian Paints rather than smaller companies. While the endeavor for investor is always to catch them young and see them grow and find the next multi-bagger. But when it comes to adaptation of technology and collaboration, it's only the big companies which are able to understand and adapt.
Yeah, so, according to me, and that's my personal view, there are two cycles at play right now. At one end of the cycle are the very large companies that were adopting to technology, like you rightly said, very fast. And those companies will see a lot of operational efficiencies. Effectively, a lot of middle men have been eliminated from the system, and the entire business has become direct to consumer. I mean, to give you an example, the HUL India head had given a statement that about 9% of HUL's business is now moving online. So they will get a lot of operational efficiency kick in. But, before this interview started, I heard you comment upon the consumption stocks, and I agree with the fact that consumption stocks are, very richly valued. The second part of it is what C.K. Pradal used to call as the bottom of the pyramid. And what is happening is that, take an example of our social system. We typically, have been, for wrong reasons, a male-dominated working society, which is not given due credit to women where we should have given. Today, a housewife making, for example, achars, her husband initially has not encouraged her for the simple reason that he thinks it's a hobby. The moment she reaches out on the social media or on the internet, and now she is able to deliver pan-India and the numbers start kicking in, he discovers that she is doing far better than even him. And in fact, he then comes and says, why don't I go to a bank, borrow some amount of money or put in money of friends or, whatever things and sort of grow your business. And as you would have seen, particularly in the last few months, there has been a huge emergence of the medium and small scale sector in India. In fact, I think that one of the biggest catalysts of growth in India is going to be this combination of digital along with these, entrepreneurs from the small and medium industry. And then where does all this money add up? It still has to go to a bank. It still has to buy, housing material and improvements and insurance and whatever things, houses and cars and whatever. So it all adds up. But you can easily play this theme by looking at financial inclusion, by looking at the entire catalyst that is coming in.
Safir, you've mentioned this Himachal housewives pickle twice now. What is this achar that you recently bought?
No, so I'm fascinated today to become the discovery is much more fascinating today because of so many brands that are coming to you while you're sitting at home. I mean, I just picked the most primitive example because, it is not an industry that is so easy to sort of have any monopoly right. You can easily sort of replicate it, and it is only limited to, the product quality itself is subject to a durability life. But look at the kind of changes. I'll give you another example. I think day before yesterday, Economic Times carried a story that the CEO of Nestle in Vevey in Switzerland, they made a statement that some part of his performance will be appraised only by the contribution that they make towards betterment of the environment and sustainability of the environment. Now, if you go to a company on YouTube, which is a very large packaging company based out of Finland and operating in India called Huhtamaki Paper, they have launched a project called Blue Loop. And in Project Blue Loop, there is a collaborative effort between the company and the brand in order to create packaging that is environment friendly. This is not a change that is coming in because a company is reaching out to a MNC company to say that, look, I've got these services. This is a change coming from awareness, quite similar to the Uber example that I gave. And therefore, it carries. Look at the potential. Just let's assume that Nestle itself changes the packaging all around the world. Look at the potential that it carries for A, the packaging companies, B, the entire marketing and the sort of positioning that will happen. In fact, I read that they're already making cups for coffee, cups that are made out of plants now, rather than making them out of the traditional materials that are not environment friendly.
The one thing, Safir, and I remember soon after the lockdown, we were chatting about, and you were pretty right in saying that, preventive healthcare is where you're going to see maximum innovation. And now as we see, this whole thing that you mentioned about the psychology changing, I mean, what more of a psychological or for that matter, a physical change one has seen than in COVID during the pandemic? And one can see that now play out even within the listed universe. Apollo Hospitals, for instance, which are now increasing their revenues from 6,000 crore rupees to 10,000 crore rupees, not just for pharmacy, but 1,000 crore rupees for diagnostics as well. How is it that you see this entire space, shaping up? Because there's clearly room for more. Within the unlisted universe as well, I'm guessing there will be a lot of players which are going to join into the bandwagon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why I said that this is a paradigm shift even for the small and medium thing. This digital enabling of India is a very, very massive shift. The catalysts are many. They are obviously for the healthcare companies. And you've given an example of Apollo. Another example, which you may have noticed, but it hasn't come up in a discussion, is a company called Max Healthcare, where there was a management change. And I don't know if you've tracked this, but the stock price is up 100% in the last maybe 3 months odd. Because if you again go back to the Max side, what they're doing is they're going to technology and their apps now. If you want to book an appointment in Max, you go on an app, the doctor sees your report electronically, the data is maintained electronically, the diagnostic reports come electronically, the next meeting prescriptions come electronically. So this is a complete change. And I was talking to a startup which was not in connection with the markets, but generally to sort of advise them on IP. And they said that they're going to, tier 2 and tier 3 towns where people do not have access necessarily to a Max or a Fortis or an Apollo. And they're creating the equivalent of ATMs there. And what they do is that they come to the ATM and they, get a report done. Then they go back to their homes. The report is sent electronically to these big hospitals and to the prominent doctors in different parts of India. By evening, the doctor has seen the report without the necessity of that person traveling to that hospital and may or may not getting an appointment. So look at this change. It's also very interesting. Another very, very big change, and I do not know, because this we will only know when the letter comes out. But for example, why has Warren Buffett increased his exposure to pharma? I think, I know this as a matter of history that pharma drug launches do not happen for years and years. But what has happened is with this entire paradigm changes, the ability to process data, the ability to look at computing. And now, we know in COVID, this is the fastest ever launch of drugs and not by one company. So you can't just call it as a, very unique feature of that company. And the ability to administer this drug dosage all over the world. So if drug companies, for example, are able to launch drugs in a gap of 1 year, which COVID is now showing, then look at the kind of change and the kind of incentive that they will have to go back into drug discovery, which they sort of left behind because they were unsure with the kind of money that was being put in R&D and the sort of long-term periods, etc., in terms of getting the drug to market. So this is again a very big change. And if more and more drugs come out, then again health management will change because your entire concept of having access to information on your phone is very different. Why just healthcare companies? I mean, look at companies that basically calm you down, and you'll see this company in America called Calm, which is one of the best-selling apps in the world. And all that they do is they'll offer you meditation, and there are companies that teach you how to breathe. And their valuations are going into billions of dollars because you are now talking about having a huge excess of clients to you or consumers to you.
So, Safir, net, and we've spoken about many from the listed universe as well in the past, be it in India Mart, Reliance, Apollo Hospitals, for instance. Suffice to say that any business, new or old, has to have the tech presence, be tech enabled for it to be a multi-bagger or a growth story from here onwards?
No, like I just gave you an example of packaging, which is not necessarily, you can't necessarily call it tech enabled. But if all of us become conscious of the environment and we start migrating towards, more user-friendly thing. I mean, people are even putting up images that the mask, and the material in the mask is not conducive to oceans, and again is causing the same problems. And then somebody will come and say, you know what, we are coming out with reusable or biodegradable material, etc. So, actually it fascinates me. You just look at what is happening around the world. There's artificial intelligence, there's computing, there is biotechnology, there's nanotechnology. I mean, we're all talking about Uber is trying to experiment with cars that are with flying cars that are going to land at the equivalent of what are helipads. The lithium industry is going through a complete technology change to make the battery so light that they're able to power electronic things. So, what happens in the market is that we see valuations as they exist, and we have some abilities or some limited abilities to compute the valuation. But we're not able to see exponential change, and it's still the time it's happening. And the biggest example of exponential change is that people, for reasons right or wrong, which I will not comment upon, trust even a currency that is not backed by any regulator in the world. But that currency has been, such a huge performer, and for whatever reasons, people believe that. So the last thing in life that you trust is to give your money to somebody that you don't even know is regulated and doesn't even have a system or a benchmark to value. So not everything is going to last. Of course, some of the things will not continue, but when I'm talking about business transformations, I think it's the longevity of the run that is going to be very long. And therefore, you are right that, there may be times when the market may correct, and the market has every right to correct. But if you are invested for the long haul, then the ability of that money to compound. In fact, I have a very interesting theory, which is for myself. I am going to change my designation from strategist to value enhancer. And I will become a VE now instead of, whatever I am. And this concept of value enhancement will only mean the fact that people just have to be aligned to the fact that they've got great ideas. And I think Prime Minister also yesterday said, India has great ideas, they don't have mentors.
Absolutely. Safir, taking that point forward and how commerce is changing, not just from being online, but actually becoming a lot more social and a lot more collaborative. That seems to be the way forward in terms of building communities, in terms of tapping into the aspirational class, various languages as well, and the smaller towns, democratizing social commerce as well. And even in terms of new businesses and the way they're looking at chat, the way they're looking at video-led, a lot of young startups that are finding innovative ways to integrate an experience into traditional commerce. I think the change is also coming there. You've also spoken in the past about how Indians are social, people are social animals, and there are bound to be new collaborative ways in which to tap into that. Share with us, based on this strategy, really, where else that one could look for opportunity, whether it even be in the beaten down names, just by the fact that given what you're describing, things are bound to revive across certain segments, in time to come.
See, let's recognize the fact that when you go into digital mode, you have an inbuilt concept of transparency to begin with, at least in terms of your numbers. And in that sense itself, a lot of companies, for example, which I'm not trying to say they were not transparent, and I'm talking about small companies, small and medium companies, but for example, they did not even have access, they did not even have the ability to understand, say, something as complex as the GST. But with technology, you're enabled to do that. With technology, you're able to do monthly filings. I mean, if I've invested in startups today, some of the startups give me monthly sales figures, which, I can understand a company as big as Unilever and Procter & Gamble doing this very efficiently. So first of all, it changes my trust paradigm towards those companies and gives me the feeling that I can put in more money there. The second real element of change is the recognition by the ecosystem itself. Like I would typically think in a traditional way, if I was looking at a retail thing, and, they would say that in order to succeed in a store, you need to have a huge muscle power, because that means you either give a lot of incentives to the retailer to position your products, or, for example, you're so successful that the retailer needs you. And even in terms of a website like Amazon, I could have been technically lost because Amazon has a huge variety of products, or Flipkart has a huge variety of products. But now a lot of these parameters are changing by the ability of the brands to reach out directly. So when those growth stories start kicking in, and those growth stories may be regional, they may be pan-India and many other things, they are carrying with them a lot of things. This is like how they used to say in California when the mining industry happened, they said, don't buy the mines, but buy all the companies that cater to the mines. So whether you are looking at logistics, whether you're looking at packaging, whether you're looking at finance, which finance here doesn't mean funding. It doesn't mean Bajaj Finance. It means the bank. The fact that today I can do a transaction of an RTGS in 24 hours is a lot of safety or a lot of trust to the business who's dealing with a stranger online who he's never met. So it will change the entire paradigm of businesses. And therefore, when the numbers start coming up and the tax collections start coming up, it will enable the government to do a lot of things, which will include better privatization, which will include better administration of health services, better infrastructure and other things. Now, you may not have to buy an infra company and make it that complex because, we don't know the orders that it's getting. But these are some of the other industries that have a longevity ahead and they're easy to sort of, get into. I mean, banks, for example, I just heard Nikunj talk before this that, State Bank of India was the company that he's talking about. It's a complete paradigm change what State Bank of India is doing with its apps, and the fact that it has an insurance business, which is doing well, and it has a credit card business. I mean, credit cards are a huge benefit of this digital India.
All right, I really appreciate your time. We've covered a range of topics in the importance of technology, disruption, and collaboration.